A few weeks ago, I was super blessed to meet my firstborn son. Yes, he finally came, but before he was born, I had the opportunity to take some maternity photos of my wife, which is not a frequent occurrence because she doesn't really like to have her picture taken. I know, kind of crazy that she married someone who's into photo video stuff, but in any case, we thought we should do some maternity photos, so I recorded some kind of behind the scenes perspective of what I was doing, and I thought I would share that with you. As most of you know, the most important part of taking photos or video is having the right location. And us being a kind of lazy couple and not wanting to spend too much time on this, we just found a cool little spot right by our house, which actually worked out really well because I actually think the photos turned out pretty cool given the location. But it was just like a wash by our house that we found, and we've since actually seen a few other people down there taking photos. So it must be a pretty popular spot. But we also got pretty lucky with the cloud cover on this day. Lots of nice soft diffusion, but it wasn't that overcast where it's just gray sky. There were just those big nice clouds blocking the sun. And so I was actually able to get some really cool lighting throughout the whole kind of hour-long photo session that we did. And unfortunately, it did start to rain a little bit, but thankfully it wasn't so bad that any of the small little specks that showed up on our outfit I was able just to Photoshop out. So that wasn't a problem. Thankfully, it could have been a lot worse, but living in Arizona, it really only rains a few times a year over the summer. And when it rains, it can pour, but we got lucky. Now, the hardest part, I think, about taking photos is focusing on all the technical aspects while you're trying to direct and tell someone else what to do and how to pose and all that stuff. And that's honestly one of my biggest struggles is, making sure all the technical settings are right and that it's framed right and that the background looks nice, but at the same time, working through the shot with the model or whoever it is. And it's a challenge for anyone. And that's why a lot of people, when they're, doing professional photos, they'll have, a camera assist or two just to worry about the technical settings, and they'll be tethered so they, tweak all that stuff on the fly. And you have someone who's just looking at, composition and color and lighting and all that stuff. And then you can have the kind of photographer who's taking the photos be working with the model or the subject and talking them through how they want them to stand, how they want them to pose. And it's definitely that. I mean, that can make or break your photos is, the positioning and the poses that you put people in, because you can have the shallowest depth of field, the sharpest lens, the best color, and it still doesn't matter if your subject looks like crap. And you might not notice it while you're taking the photos, but you'll definitely notice it after the fact if they're standing strange or their hair was in a weird spot or all the little things that can go wrong. You really have to have a keen eye for all that stuff. Now for this, where it was just me and my wife, it's a little bit more casual, a little bit more relaxed, and she doesn't like to always listen to everything I tell her to do. But in any case, I tried doing my best to get the shots I wanted, get the location and the composition down, but still kind of make her feel comfortable on camera because she doesn't necessarily like to do it. And I wanted her to feel good about what we were doing. And thankfully, after the fact, she really liked all the photos. I think they turned out really nice. Certainly, I don't know if they're better than I expected, but it just everything kind of worked out. The location was good. She was great. I happened to be doing an okay job, but honestly, most of it was the location and her, and then a few kind of coloring techniques that I did in Lightroom. But it honestly wasn't anything all that special. Just doing the normal basic stuff. And again, if you want like tutorials on that, there's tons of content out there on the internet of people walking you through how to use Lightroom and how to make sure you're in focus and what settings you should use in daylight and all this stuff. But essentially what I was doing was higher shutter speed because I'm filming with a longer lens, so longer focal length, higher shutter speed to minimize any kind of movement that I might be introducing, as well as stopping any kind of movement that she might have been doing. I believe I was shooting wide open at 2.8. I probably wouldn't normally do that if it was something professional, because I would just want the absolute sharpest image I could get. So probably I would have shot more around f4 with the 70 to 200, but honestly, with 7200, you can shoot at 2.8 and it's still pretty good. Just for something professional, I probably would have done it at f4. But for this, because it doesn't, these are Facebook photos essentially, or something that we can print out and, put on the wall. It's a small little print. I was shooting at 2.8. Just, people tend to like the shallow depth of field. So that's what I was doing. Again, using a longer focal length, and then my ISO pretty limited because I was outside, so I didn't have to crank it at all. It was probably at 100 or 200. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was something low, I'm sure, is what I did. And then I took a nice mixture of portrait and landscape shots. I like to get a little bit of both because you never know how the photos are going to be used. If it's going to be, on a card, what's the layout of the card? Where does the text go? There's a lot of stuff. So just to cover all my bases, I take portrait and landscape shots all the time. And just a little bit of both for each scenario. As far as composition, following rule of thirds, normal type stuff. And then for positioning and posing, I was walking her through, the focus is on the maternity photos. The focus is on the belly, right? That's where everyone wants to look. So having poses that drew people's eye into or around her belly, her looking at her belly rather than looking at the camera. I tend to think shots of someone doing something not aware of the camera are usually more interesting. There's certainly a time and place for people looking at the camera too, but I think for something like this, it's more about the bond with the mother and unborn baby. So having her look at the belly was really important to me, and I wanted her looking at it and kind of capturing that emotion that moms have for their babies, and getting that and harnessing that rather than it being like posed, smile at the camera, that kind of thing. I did get a few of those too, because you never know what people are going to want. People don't necessarily even know what they want until after the fact. They look at it and they're like, hey, did you get any of where I was looking at the camera smiling? And you're like, no, I didn't. So always wanted to get a little bit of everything. And another thing that was really key was having her turn kind of left or right slightly to see that there was a belly. She, facing straight on the camera, it's really, you don't see that depth. Photos are two-dimensional images, so unless you're doing some kind of fancy lighting or something special, you're not going to see that depth. So having her turn slightly one way or the other was really effective in showcasing that she was indeed pregnant, and that's why we were taking the photo, so let's do it. And then, doing stuff with the arms, tucking elbows back, stuff with, pushing your forehead towards the camera, chin down, shoulders back, okay, cross your legs, tilt your hips, kind of adding, I don't know what the right, geometry, I guess, into the image rather than just someone just standing like blah. Most people, when they stand, it's not how they want to look, because people see ads and professional photos all the time, and it's always models doing poses and stuff. And so when people just kind of stand there like stiff blocks, they kind of feel like they look like schlubs. So it's usually a good idea to throw some kind of movement into the picture, whether it's just, hey, putting a hand on a hip, putting your hands in your pockets, kicking a foot forward. There's a bunch of different stuff you can do, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It honestly sometimes depends on the person. Some people can pull off poses that other people can't. So just play around with it and have fun. Inevitably, you'll make the person feel really awkward, and that's always good, because then they laugh about it and you get a nice action shot of them laughing. So I don't know if there's much else for me to say other than I'm just really grateful that she let me take these photos, because I'm really happy with how they turned out. And I'm sure there's other techniques and tips that you guys use, that you do. I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. If there's something you have a question about and you want to ask and I didn't answer in this, certainly you can ask me below in the comments as well. I usually get to those now that I have the YouTube Creator app. I can do it more frequently, because when I'm on the go, I can respond to those comments. So questions, comments, concerns, complaints, whatever it is, you just let me know. Happy to respond, and hopefully you guys like the photos as much as I do, because my wife is beautiful and our baby boy is pretty beautiful too now that he's here. But I wanted to show off these because I'm pretty proud of them and how they turned out for the quick casual shoot that it was. It was a fun time, and hopefully you guys had fun listening to me talk about it for a little bit.